After spending a year drowning in boardrooms and battlegrounds of betrayal across Europe, Ethan Blackwell finally returned to the one place that once gave him peace, his sprawling Montana estate tucked away in the folds of icy wilderness, where silence stretched for miles and even the winds seemed to whisper memories of simpler times. The towering gates creaked open like old friends too tired to greet him, and as his sleek black car curved up the gravel path, the mansion came into view, unchanged in structure but eerily lifeless in soul. Snow clung to the windows like frost-bitten sorrow, and inside the polished floors echoed with emptiness. No footsteps, no laughter, no life. Just the sound of a broken man returning to a life he no longer recognized. Ethan stepped through the doors with a suitcase in one hand and bitterness in the other, his navy trench coat shielding him from more than just the cold. It held in the weight of a year's worth of decisions, mistakes, and consequences that had hardened him into someone almost unrecognizable. He hadn't come back for comfort. He'd stopped believing in that long ago. But something deep inside him, quiet and persistent, had whispered that perhaps this place still held remnants of who he once was. The staff greeted him with stiff smiles. Unfamiliar faces now filled roles once held by loyal ones who'd moved on. And though their politeness was rehearsed, there was no mistaking the stiff air of caution in their presence. As he walked further inside, the cold marble beneath his shoes felt more like a tomb than a homecoming. But then something changed. The air shifted. A scent he hadn't expected teased his senses. Something warm, nostalgic, and achingly human. Fresh apple pie. Not the artificial kind catered by five-star chefs, but homemade, rich with cinnamon and memory. It hit him like a wave, stirring something deep in his chest. And then he heard it, a soft hum, sweet and tender, almost like a lullaby carried on the wind, echoing from the kitchen down the hall. Intrigued and uncharacteristically drawn in, Ethan followed the melody, unsure why his pulse had quickened or why the hollowness in his chest had suddenly tightened. He pushed open the heavy kitchen door and paused at the threshold, breath-catching, not from surprise but something far more dangerous. There, under the golden glow of the morning sun filtering through foggy windows, stood a woman, spinning slightly on her heel as she stirred a pot and sang a soft tune to herself, oblivious to the fact that the ground beneath Ethan had just shifted. Her name, he'd later learn, was Callie Monroe, a new cook hired during his absence. But in that moment, titles didn't matter. She wasn't society's porcelain perfection. She didn't drip diamonds or carry herself with designer poise. No, she was something far rarer, authentic. Honey blonde hair pulled into a loose bun with strands falling like sunlight over her cheek, a slight dimple peeking when she smiled at her own humming, flour dusting her apron like snowflakes. Her back turned, she remained unaware of the storm her presence had just ignited in the quiet billionaire. Ethan didn't speak, couldn't. He simply stared, paralyzed not by attraction, but by the overwhelming sense that something was beginning. A chapter he hadn't signed up for, but couldn't stop from unfolding. And then she turned, eyes locking onto his with a gasp caught halfway between surprise and nervous apology. And for the first time in 12 hollow, brutal months, Ethan Blackwell felt something flicker in his soul. Not love, not yet, but warmth, a spark, a subtle crack in the armor he had so meticulously forged. Callie froze, a wooden spoon still in her hand, cheeks flushed with the kind of blush no makeup could replicate, and offered an awkward smile. "I didn't know you were back, Mr. Blackwell," she said, voice soft, genuine, untainted by agenda. Ethan's jaw tightened, not in irritation, but restraint, because everything about her screamed familiarity in a world where nothing had felt familiar in so long. He nodded curtly, retreating behind the cold exterior that had served him so well, muttering something indifferent as he turned to leave. But even as he walked away, her eyes followed him, and his mind lingered on her. The sound of her voice echoed longer than it should have. The scent of pie refused to fade, and though he wouldn't admit it to himself, something deep beneath the surface of Ethan Blackwell, a man who'd seen too much and trusted too little, was waking up. Ethan hadn't expected her to linger in his thoughts, but as days passed, Callie Monroe became the quiet pulse of the house. Soft, steady, and strangely grounding. The once cold, lifeless estate slowly began to shift, not through grand gestures or renovations, but through the gentle warmth that trailed behind her every step, the comforting clatter of pots and pans in the morning, the gentle hum of her voice weaving through the halls like a forgotten lullaby resurrected. The staff, once reserved and mechanical, now smiled more easily, spoke a little louder, and worked with a rhythm that hadn't existed before her arrival. It wasn't just the food, though. Her dishes somehow felt like edible memories. Creamy soups that soothed aches no doctor could diagnose, flaky pastries that crumbled with nostalgia, and dinners that wrapped the soul in invisible arms of comfort. It was her. Callie was sunshine dressed in modest sweaters and aprons, laughter tucked behind guarded eyes, always cheerful, yet holding something sacred behind her gaze. Ethan kept his distance, both out of instinct and necessity, watching her from behind the veil of a man still stitched together by pride and wariness. He told himself it was curiosity, that he only lingered near the kitchen to ensure quality or order, but he knew it wasn't true. He stayed longer than needed, hovered at corners where he wouldn't be seen, listened to her sing songs he didn't recognize, but felt like he'd always known. And she never pried, never asked him about the furrow in his brow or the sadness that seemed tattooed into his expression. She treated him like a man, not a title, not a billionaire with a broken empire stitched under his suit. Just Ethan. The days moved slowly, blanketed in snow and silence, until one evening the power cut out, plunging the mansion into a velvet blackness so thick it swallowed time. A blizzard howled outside like a chorus of ghosts, and the generator faltered under the weight of the storm, leaving only flickers of emergency light in the glow of flickering candles. Ethan descended the stairs with a flashlight in hand and frustration simmering in his veins, only to find Callie already in the parlor, arranging candles on the mantel, her face bathed in warm amber light that danced across her features like a painter's muse. She looked up, startled but unafraid, and offered a nervous smile. "Guess we'll have to rough it tonight," she joked, voice light but edged with a vulnerability that curled under Ethan's skin. With no electricity and nowhere else to go, they sat in the dim room, the storm outside screaming while inside. Something quieter stirred. At first, the silence stretched awkwardly between them, interrupted only by the crackle of the fireplace. But slowly, as if lured by the honesty of shadows, Callie began to speak. She told him about her mother, how she used to hum while kneading bread, how Sunday dinners were sacred, how grief had stolen more than just a parent, but had also taken her sense of home. Cooking, she said, was the only way she could feel her mother's presence again. Ethan didn't interrupt. He just listened, not with the polite nods of someone making conversation, but with the silent awe of a man who hadn't heard a voice speak to his heart in years. Her words painted pictures he hadn't seen since childhood, of warmth, of belonging, of love that wasn't transactional. For the first time, he wasn't thinking of boardrooms or betrayal or the ghost of the man he used to be. He was just here, in this moment, with her. But even as something tender bloomed between them, it was tethered to unspoken shadows. Callie's eyes glimmered with sadness when she paused, and Ethan could feel the weight of the things she wasn't saying, secrets kept like delicate china tucked behind cabinet doors. And he too remained silent about his scars, about the corporate wars that had stolen his faith in people, about the woman who'd once promised him forever and left with his soul packed in a suitcase. They didn't name their wounds, but they sat together in quiet understanding, a strange intimacy blooming not from touch or flirtation, but from shared silence and mutual ache. That night, the mansion no longer felt haunted, and the storm outside, though relentless, felt like background noise to something far more powerful, a connection sparking beneath layers of caution. Ethan looked at her across the dim candlelight and felt something shift inside, a quiet rebellion against the loneliness he had accepted as permanent. She met his gaze, held it for a heartbeat longer than necessary, and in that moment, neither of them said it aloud, but both knew. Something had begun, and neither of them were ready for the truths it would uncover. The days that followed the storm carried a weight, one that neither Ethan nor Callie could put into words. There was a fragile tenderness between them now, an unspoken understanding that hovered just beneath the surface, woven with the threads of the things they hadn't yet said. Ethan found himself drawn to her in ways he couldn't explain, noticing the way she smiled at the little things, the way her hands seemed to move with grace, like she was always offering pieces of herself in every meal she prepared, every glance she gave. But even as he grew closer to her, he couldn't shake the feeling that there were parts of Callie he wasn't allowed to touch. Fragments of her past she kept hidden beneath the layers of her calm exterior. He'd overheard her once, late at night, whispering to herself as if sorting through memories that had long since turned bitter. And then there was the moment when she finally told him. She'd once been engaged to a man she had trusted with her heart, but betrayal had shattered the bond. She didn't go into details and Ethan didn't press her, sensing the vulnerability in her voice. But something in her eyes spoke volumes. The quiet pain, the haunted look she tried so hard to hide. It was a wound she hadn't healed from, a scar that ran deeper than her words would allow. Just as the fragile connection between them began to bloom, another shadow arrived. Victoria Hale. Ethan had known Victoria once, a woman of wealth and influence, a ruthless socialite who had once captivated him with her beauty and charms. But that was before she broke his heart, before she turned her back on him when he needed her most. She had betrayed him too, in a way that left scars far deeper than the ones she had caused in his heart. Now after all this time she appeared at his doorstep, wearing the same smile that once made his pulse race. But this time, it felt like a mask, one she used to hide her true intentions. She said it was a friendly visit, a reunion between old acquaintances. But Ethan knew better. Her manipulations were subtle, the way she laced her words with familiarity, the way her eyes lingered on him just a second too long. But what really grated on him was the way she treated Callie. She made her presence felt in every room, ignoring Callie's warmth, her kindness, as if she were invisible. The condescending smiles, the remarks that bordered on belittling, all masked as jokes. Ethan watched it all from the shadows, his fists clenched at his sides. Victoria didn't realize that, while she thought she was playing the game, Ethan was seeing everything, and it only made his heart turn against her more. He saw the difference now between the two women, Victoria with her polished cruelty and shallow affection, and Callie with her quiet strength, the way she didn't need to say a word to command respect, the way she moved through life with dignity, offering warmth without expecting anything in return. It was real, it was raw, and it was something Ethan had been missing for so long, something he had never known he needed. Callie, despite the pain she carried from her past, never allowed anyone to diminish her light. And in that moment, watching Victoria's fake charm unravel against Callie's quiet confidence, Ethan understood something he hadn't allowed himself to admit until now. He was falling for her. The realization was slow, almost painful. But as he watched Callie stand tall against Victoria's thinly veiled disdain, Ethan knew. He knew that what they had was real. The quiet moments they shared, the way she made him feel like the man he once was, whole and not broken, that was something worth protecting. And Victoria, with all her grandeur and manipulation, would never understand that. The confrontation, when it finally came, was inevitable. Ethan's patience had worn thin, and as he stepped into the room where Victoria was playing her games, he couldn't help but feel a quiet rage rise inside him. He was done letting people like her make him doubt his worth, done pretending that someone like her had any claim over him. He turned to Callie, who stood silently, her eyes filled with the same quiet strength he had admired for so long. And he knew he would fight for her. He would stand between her and anyone who thought they could trample on what was real. And in that moment, something deep inside Ethan shifted. He was no longer the broken billionaire haunted by his past, but a man who was ready to protect the future he never thought he'd have. The storm that had been brewing beneath the surface finally broke, and it wasn't the kind of tempest anyone could have anticipated. Victoria's fury at being rejected turned into something far darker, more destructive. In her need to regain control, she began to spread vicious rumors, sly whispers to the press, painting Callie as a manipulative gold digger, claiming she was using Ethan to climb her way into the elite circles. The tabloids latched onto the story, devouring it with a bloodthirsty hunger. They printed photos of Callie in the kitchen, making innocuous comments about how she'd landed herself a billionaire, as if her entire life had been a scheme, reducing her to nothing but a caricature. Ethan watched in horror as his world twisted into chaos, but even as the cruel words seeped into every corner of his life, it was Callie's world that seemed to collapse entirely. The smile that had once lit up her face vanished, and the warmth in her eyes turned into something more guarded, more broken. She retreated into herself, becoming a shadow of the woman he had come to admire so deeply. But what crushed Ethan the most was seeing how much Callie blamed herself, how much she wanted to shield him from the fallout of Victoria's lies. When the damage was too much to ignore, when the headlines refused to die down, Callie made a decision that shattered Ethan's heart. She would leave. She told him quietly, with a calmness that didn't match the storm raging inside her, that she couldn't let him lose everything because of her. "You deserve someone without baggage," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. The words were a dagger, cutting deeper than anything he'd ever experienced. Callie, so full of life, so full of strength, was willing to walk away because of a lie. His hand reached for her, as if to stop the world from crumbling around them, but she was already packing, already getting ready to walk out the door. Ethan stood frozen, watching the woman he had unknowingly fallen for make the hardest decision of her life, the one that would tear them both apart. He couldn't let her go. Not like this. He couldn't lose the only person who had shown him what it meant to love without condition, without expectation. He needed to make her see that what they had, what they shared, wasn't just some fleeting fantasy. It was real, and it was worth fighting for. "You're the only real thing I've known in years," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion, but there was no hesitation in his words. "Don't walk away, Callie. Don't leave me." He could see the struggle in her eyes, then the doubt, the pain of her decision, and yet there was still a flicker of hope there. Ethan wasn't sure if it was enough, if they could fix everything that had been broken, but in that moment, with her standing before him, so close yet so far, he knew that he would do whatever it took to keep her by his side. She was worth every battle, every sacrifice. As he closed the distance between them, his hands cupped her face, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, he allowed himself to breathe. "You're not a burden, Callie. You never were. Let me fight this with you," he pleaded, his voice thick with the emotions he had kept locked away for too long. He had been a man of control, a man who believed he could fix everything on his own. But in that moment, he realized he wasn't just fixing the mess his past had left behind. He was fighting for the future that Callie had already unknowingly shown him was possible. He was fighting for them. Ethan knew he had to make things right, and that meant getting away from the chaos, the rumors, and the prying eyes of the world. He needed to take Callie somewhere where they could talk, truly talk, without the weight of everything else pressing down on them. He drove her to a small, secluded cabin by the lake, a place that had once been his haven, a sanctuary for moments of peace he hadn't had in years. This was where his mother used to bring him, away from everything and everyone, where time seemed to slow, and the only thing that mattered was the calmness of the water and the quiet whispers of the wind. As the two of them stepped out into the stillness of the night, the stars above them felt like the only audience they could trust, the only ones who could see them for who they truly were, not the versions the world had painted. Ethan, his hands trembling, took a deep breath and turned to Callie. "I've been running from the truth for so long," he started, his voice heavy with the weight of unspoken words. He paused, as if gathering the courage to say what he had been holding back. "Victoria, she left scars on me, emotional ones, deep ones. She made me believe I was nothing more than my money, that I could never be loved for who I really am, just for what I have. I've always feared that someone would love me for the wrong reasons, that they'd see my wealth, not me." Callie's eyes softened as she listened, her heart aching for him. He had never spoken like this before, not even when they were alone. "I'm sorry you've had to carry that," she whispered, her words soothing the rawness of his confession. She took his hand, squeezing it gently. a silent promise that she would never see him that way. He closed his eyes, the weight of years of solitude and misunderstanding pressing against him. Then in a voice that was barely above a whisper, he added, "But with you, Callie, it's different. I feel like I'm finally being seen. The real me." The tenderness in his voice, the vulnerability in his admission, made her heart swell. She stepped closer to him, the quiet sound of the lake lapping against the shore filling the space between them. "I've never been seen for who I truly am either," she said softly, her own pain coming to the surface. "Cooking. It became my escape, my refuge. After bouncing from foster home to foster home, it was the one thing that kept me grounded, that gave me a sense of purpose. It's how I healed, how I found myself." Her words hung in the air, and Ethan could feel the depth of her soul in them. This woman, this incredible woman, had her own scars, her own battles. And yet, she had managed to keep her heart open, to find light even in the darkest places. He cupped her face gently, as if afraid to break the delicate bond they were forming. "You're stronger than you know," he whispered. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, the world around them faded into nothing. The past, the pain, the fear, all of it seemed insignificant as they stood together, just the two of them, beneath the stars. Without thinking, he leaned in, and their lips met in a kiss. Gentle at first, as if testing the waters, then growing deeper, more intense as the emotions they had kept hidden came pouring out. It was a kiss full of reverence, full of all the things they had never said, full of all the things they had been afraid to feel. As they pulled away, their foreheads rested against each other, their breathing shallow and synchronized. For the first time in what felt like forever, Ethan felt at peace. He felt seen, heard, and, most importantly, loved, not for his wealth, but for who he was. The moment was perfect, wrapped in the soft glow of candlelight, in the warmth of shared vulnerability. With a sigh, Callie leaned against his chest and they both sank into the blankets, wrapped up in the silence of the night. It wasn't just the kiss that made it special. It was the understanding, the connection that had finally bloomed between them. They fell asleep in each other's arms, no longer afraid to be seen for who they were, safe in the knowledge that they had found something real, something that neither the chaos of the world nor the scars of the past could ever take away. Just as things seemed to calm down, the peace is shattered by an unexpected call. Ethan's heart sinks as he listens to his lawyer's urgent tone on the other end of the line. Victoria, in a twisted attempt at revenge, has sued Callie for defamation, claiming she ruined her reputation with false accusations. It's a bitter, underhanded move designed to strike at the core of everything Ethan holds dear. The news breaks out fast, and the media immediately latches onto it, presenting Callie as the villain in a story she never wanted to be a part of. Ethan is furious, but there's a part of him that knows this is just Victoria's game, something far deeper and darker than mere petty rivalry. His lawyers, sharp as ever, urge him to distance himself from the situation, to protect his brand, his business, his name. They tell him that his involvement will only bring more drama and scrutiny, but Ethan doesn't care. Not anymore. He's done with hiding, done with letting the people he loves be dragged through the mud for the sake of appearances. He takes a deep breath, knowing that the choice he's about to make will alter everything. That afternoon, in front of flashing cameras and a sea of reporters, Ethan does the unthinkable. He holds a press conference, his voice steady but filled with an emotion he hasn't allowed himself to show in years. "Victoria Hale," he begins, his words cutting through the noise of the room, "has been manipulating the truth for far too long. And I've let her, but no more." The room falls silent, all eyes fixed on him as he goes on. "I've spent too long in a world of lies, of pretending to be someone I'm not. But the one thing I know for sure is that Callie Monroe is nothing like the woman she's been portrayed to be. She's strong, she's kind, and she's honest. And I will not stand by and let her be dragged through this for the sake of a woman who's only ever cared about her own image." Ethan's words are not just a defense, they're a declaration. He's exposing the years of manipulations Victoria has orchestrated, the lies he's tolerated, and the evidence he's quietly gathered over time. His voice trembles with a fire he never thought he'd unleash, yet it's a fire that's been waiting to break free. The media is stunned. The tables turn quickly. What was once a story of betrayal and scandal becomes one of a powerful man defending the woman he loves, proving the truth with facts and a raw honesty that leaves no room for doubt. Victoria, once the queen of manipulation, is now the one on the receiving end of public scorn. But while the world shifts and the media swarms her, Callie remains distant, almost withdrawn. The triumph, the vindication, feels distant to her. When she sees Ethan later that evening, she doesn't run into his arms with the joy he expects. Instead, she looks at him with uncertainty in her eyes. "Why would you risk everything for me?" Her voice is barely above a whisper, as if the weight of the question could shatter the fragile peace they've built. Ethan stares at her for a long moment, a mixture of confusion and love in his gaze. "Because you gave me something worth risking it all for," he finally says, his voice steady but full of emotion. "You gave me truth, Callie. Something I thought I lost a long time ago." But Callie, despite the overwhelming support from the public, still feels the burden of the past. The weight of her own insecurities and the scars from her earlier battles, ones she thought she'd left behind, press down on her. The fear of being hurt, of losing him, fills her chest. "I'm not who you think I am," she says, her voice quivering slightly, the old fears creeping back in. Ethan takes a step closer, his hand reaching out to gently lift her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You're everything I've ever needed," he says softly, his thumb brushing away the tear that has slipped down her cheek. "I see you, Callie, for who you are, and I'm never letting go." In that moment, Callie realizes that Ethan's love isn't just for the woman the world sees. It's for the real her, the one who's been hiding in the shadows of her own pain. And for the first time, she lets herself believe it. The weight of the world finally lifts when the lawsuit is dropped. Victoria, her plans unraveling, flees the country in disgrace, leaving behind a string of broken promises and shattered lies. The headlines change, and her manipulations are exposed for all to see. With her gone, the storm that had been clouding Ethan and Callie's lives dissipates, leaving the calm in its wake. After everything they've been through, Ethan and Callie return to the mansion. But it's no longer just a mansion. Now it feels like something much more profound. It feels like home. They take a long, deep breath in the space that once echoed only with loneliness and emptiness. No longer a cold fortress of isolation, it's transformed. Together they set to work on bringing their vision to life. Ethan, the once hard and distant billionaire, now finds joy in the most simple of tasks. The old guest house, a symbol of their previous distance, is now being renovated into Callie's dream, a cooking studio where she can share her culinary skills with the world. With each day that passes, the walls of that house fill with laughter, creativity, and love. Callie's eyes sparkle as they pick out countertops, paint the walls, and choose new kitchen appliances. She watches with admiration as Ethan helps her design the space, not just as a project, but as something personal, something that represents their future. Ethan doesn't mind the work. In fact, he loves it. For the first time in years, he finds contentment not in his boardrooms or his empire, but in the little moments with Callie. They both know this is just the beginning. When the studio is complete, they waste no time. Callie launches her own YouTube cooking channel, pouring her heart into each recipe she shares. She tells the stories of her childhood, the struggles of growing up in foster care, and how cooking became her refuge. Her viewers, captivated by her authenticity, flock to her channel. She doesn't just offer food, she offers a piece of her soul. The world responds, falling in love with the honesty and warmth that radiates from her every video. But it's not just Callie who's changed. Ethan watches her success with pride, seeing the woman she's become. The woman who isn't afraid to be herself, who never sought approval from anyone but herself. The more he watches, the more he realizes just how deeply he's fallen in love with her. She's not just the woman who cooks. She's the woman who healed him, who made him see the world in a completely new way. Her love has changed him, softened the edges of the man he once was. Months go by, and life in the mansion becomes a quiet harmony. The chaos of their past, the betrayals, and the hardships are distant memories now, overshadowed by the love they've built. Callie's channel grows steadily, and her confidence blossoms. She's finally found a place where she can be everything she ever dreamed of and more. And Ethan, who once thought he could never be satisfied by anything more than his wealth, now finds his greatest joy in her happiness. He's content, not because of his fortune, but because he's found the one person who completes him in every way. Then one evening, after the kitchen is quiet, Ethan knows the time has come. He waits for the perfect moment, one that feels like fate has led him to it. The lights in the kitchen dim, the air cool and crisp, the faintest scent of Callie's cooking lingering in the air. It's the same kitchen where it all started, the place where they first met, where they first found each other amidst the chaos. Ethan takes a deep breath and walks to the center of the room, his heart beating loudly in his chest. He pulls out a small velvet box and drops to one knee. The world slows down in that moment. Callie's eyes widen with surprise, her breath catching in her throat. "Callie," Ethan says, his voice thick with emotion, "you cooked your way into my soul. You've healed me in ways I never thought possible. Will you marry me?" Tears instantly well up in Callie's eyes and her hand trembles as she reaches out for him. For a moment she can't speak. The years of uncertainty, of pain, and of self-doubt seem to vanish in that instant. Everything she's ever wanted, everything she's ever dreamed of, is right here in front of her. She nods, unable to contain the overwhelming flood of emotions. "Yes. Always. Yes." With those words, the world shifts once again. Ethan rises to his feet, wrapping his arms around her. The man who once believed that love wasn't for him, the man who feared that nothing could ever be enough, now knows the truth. Love, in its purest form, is the most powerful force in his life, and Callie is the woman who brought that love to life. The mansion, once a place of loneliness and pain, now stands as a testament to their journey, how two people, broken in different ways, came together to build something beautiful. The lonely billionaire is no longer lonely, for he has found his true home in Callie's love, in her heart, in the life they've built together.